All right, we are live, I think.
Maybe.
So, if you can see us, welcome back to Lean on Success, or Process Improvement and Self Improvement. My name is Ben, and as promised, I have a very special guest. He is our friendly neighborhood accountant, Scott Barber. Scott, how you doing tonight?
Doing great. How's it going, Ben?
It's going well, man. We were talking a little bit before the show started. I wanted to. I asked you last week to come on because there's a lot of news buzzing about a potential government shutdown, and you are kind of my, I would say, boots on the ground from a federal government shenanigan standpoint. So I wanted you to get kind of educate us and inform us a little bit about what's going on, and so that we can get a better understanding of what's happening. What can we anticipate? How is it affecting you personally? How is it going to affect Americans in general? So just wanted you to walk us through all of that.
Yeah. Happy to talk about as much of it as I can. Appreciate you having me on to do so.
No problem. So I guess my first question is, the government shutting down. What does that even mean?
Right. Yeah. Whenever you think the government shut down, you're like, does that mean the planes are going to fall out of the sky? And does that mean that the power grid is going to go? No, none of that's going to happen. The federal government shutdown is simply that the federal government is essentially funded every federal fiscal year by the spending budget. You'll hear it called the omnibus bill or the fiscal budget. You'll hear it called a lot of different names, but essentially all it is every year Congress passes a new budget to actually direct the spending and allow the government to spend funds that it has on the functioning of the federal government. The federal fiscal year ends on September 30th every year, and we're coming up on it on Saturday. Saturday is the last day of the federal fiscal year. Friday for business purposes, but Saturday in actuality. Which means that since Congress doesn't have a new spending bill passed as of now, and if it doesn't have a spending bill or what is called a continuing resolution, I'll get into that later, either a spending bill or a continuing resolution, if neither one of those has been passed before Saturday at midnight Eastern, then the federal government goes into shutdown, which means that other than essential exceptions, for the most part, a lot of government services stop until the government is allowed to spend funds as business as usual, so to speak.
Gotcha. Okay. So when you talked about the omnibus bill and so forth, so is there something specific that Congress would need to do to prevent or allow this shutdown to happen?
Well, okay, like I said, they would either have to pass a spending bill, which is rare.
Right.
It is very, very rare that a spending bill gets passed on 10-1. Usually that can is kicked down the street and it's passed in anywhere from December to March most of the time, because Congress can't seem to agree on how much to spend or where to spend funds and the particularities of it, as it were. But what usually does happen is a thing I mentioned earlier called a CR, which is a continuing resolution. All a continuing resolution, I'll call a CR probably from now on, is a short bill that's anywhere from 4 to 40 pages, not a very long bill at all, but all it basically says is, as of 10-1, whatever the budget was, with few exceptions, and they put those in the bill in exact language, with these few exceptions, whatever was the budget in the prior fiscal year is going to be the budget for the current fiscal year until a certain date. Last year, I think the initial CR was until December 17th. And you probably remember, you may or may not remember, there was a little bit of buzz last year about when they passed the CR around December 17th, people were nervous that, oh, we might be going into a shutdown. And then they had like a week extension from that. They passed a second CR that allowed the government to stay open for like another week. And right around Christmas, they finally passed the full spend bill, aka the omnibus bill, to actually fully fund the government for the fiscal year. to get the spending bill in place for it. But
Sure.
the difference between last year and pretty much most prior years and this year is that this year the shutdown's happening right away, apparently, which is on 10/1, which is a little unusual. Usually there's at least an initial CR to fund the government for 2-3 months until they can get whatever differences they have hammered out. And then the full spending bill gets put into place. This year's not that case. They're not even going to try to have an initial CR. They're just going to say, unless we get what we want, we being the people holding the bill up, they're not even going to talk about a CR, spending bill, anything. It's all dead in the water.
Gotcha. Okay. So you talked about, pending shutdown. I covered this a little bit in my last live stream last week in terms of who are all the players involved and looking at multiple reports from multiple different sources, it appears that the breakdown, I guess, in communication, or really the impetus for the shutdown, is a lack of agreement on the House Representative side, and specifically with House Republicans. Is that your understanding of what's happening?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I understand to be. Again, being apolitical on this is just in the terms of fact. It appears that Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy and what's known as the Freedom Caucus, which is about 20 members, I believe, and I forget the exact number of a core of right-wing Republicans, so to speak, are sort of arguing over what is quote unquote demands are going to be met before they take up a new spending bill.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and I also have been reading from multiple sources about the Senate is trying to put together some type of bipartisan plan. I was actually a little surprised by that, because specifically they talked about how Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, I think, did some type of either joint press or a joint interview,
right,
which is pretty much the equivalent of like Superman and Lex Luthor coming together.
Right.
Now, based on your political leaning, you can decide for yourselves which one is which.
Right, which one's which. Right. But yeah,
they're both evil to me, but whatever.
Yeah, those two guys don't usually end up on the same side of anything. But yeah, from what I understand, I don't know if this is true or not, but it's my understanding that the Senate actually has a spending bill ready to go. And they are talking about sending it over to the House for them to vote on. But I don't think the House is even going to consider it. They're not even going to take it up for vote, from what I understand. And again, that's not inside baseball. It's just general reading the same thing that the general public reads. That's not me being on the inside of Treasury or anything, knowing that.
Yeah, it seems, well, there's definitely a disconnect, because last week McCarthy talked about, we're pledged to work through the weekend to get this done. And then like the next report was, well, all the Republicans left for the weekend. Like,
right.
Okay.
Message. Yeah.
So
message there.
So I mean, it seems, based on barring some type of miracle, or like you said, some conversations that aren't being reported, it sounds like this is going to be a reality. Is that your opinion, or are you holding out hope that something will happen here?
I have been of the opinion for a few weeks now. The phrase I keep using at our work is more likely than not. And I keep saying, the way I see it, it is more likely than not that we will have a government shutdown. I believe it's going to happen. I know at work we're preparing for it to happen. And with that being said, that's pretty much all we can do is prepare for this to happen. Where I was, I know we spoke earlier about the debt ceiling issue, and I was pretty adamant that that wasn't going to happen. I feel pretty much the same. I felt very confident that wasn't going to happen. I feel pretty confident that this one will happen. I don't see a Deus ex machina situation where something just comes out of the sky and miracles a budget agreement or a CR agreement that's going to land in our lap before Saturday.
Gotcha.
I just don't see it happening. I see a shutdown as going to happen.
So if this shutdown happens, how does that impact federal employees? And also feel free to share how that might impact you specifically.
Well, I'll start with me. I'm business as usual. A lot of people, the Treasury's business as usual. We're considered essential employees, and essential employees just keep going. There's special language written in code that says that these certain types of employees keep on keeping on to keep the government working in essential situations and roles. Really, there's three buckets that they fall into, and that's the people like that where it's essential employees that nothing really changes. They keep showing up to work, they keep getting paid. And then there's people who are furloughed, and furloughed is just a way of saying that they get sent home, they don't work, they don't get paid, but once the government does come back online, once they are funded in arrears. They're paid whatever time they were missed. And then there's this middle ground, and this middle ground is I always give my brother. My brother is a MSHA employee, Mining Safety Health Administration employee, and he is considered essential, so he has to go to work, but he doesn't receive a paycheck for the time he's at work until the government spending bill gets passed or CR gets passed. So he shows up, works, doesn't get paid every 2 weeks as he usually does, but once the government comes back online, he'll get paid regularly plus all the time they missed in the previous time.
That sucks.
The middle one really sucks. The middle one really sucks. But those, I don't know how many people are in that situation, but I do know that it does. Like I said, my brother is in that situation. If there's a mine emergency in somewhere and he has to go and take care of, he's pretty high up in the MSHA ranks. And something he has to take care of, he's got to go take care of it. But, he's just sitting on the sidelines as far as paycheck goes.
I read an article, I believe there was a shutdown back in, I believe it was 2019, and they were talking, and I actually remember this, where there was a shutdown and TSA employees were kind of that middle tier that you just discussed.
Yeah, TSA is a good example of that too, yeah.
And, they were still required to go to work, but they didn't get paid. But
that's right.
There was a lot of people calling in sick.
They're very bitter about it, and as they should be. I mean, whenever you go to work and you don't get paid for it, I mean, most people don't, you've got your problems at work. There's days you don't want to get up and go to work as it is. And if you knew that you had to go to work and not receive a paycheck for it until whatever is going on in Washington gets straightened out, I get where they'd be bitter about it. I'd be bitter about it too. 100% understand it. But that's unfortunately what some situations lead to with stuff like this.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I don't want to sound insensitive to other people who are also losing their jobs, but I think one of the impacts we can anticipate with the shutdown is long lines if you're getting on a plane somewhere, right? Because there's probably going to be understaffed.
Yeah, there's going to be effects like that fall out of this for sure. Because like you said, if people don't get paid, and then if they've got sick time and they're just like, you know what, I can use up to say they can use up to 3 days without needing a doctor's note. They're going to call in for 2, show up for 1, call in for 2, show up for 1. There's ways to game the system that I may or may not have heard about from my brother from when he was whenever he had a situation like this years ago with shutdown. But I've heard of a lot of those tricks that people do, and it inconveniences everybody. And on top of it, there's a lot of services that aren't considered essential that go down just in general with the federal government shutting down. It's going to be a pain for a lot of people.
Yeah, I want to talk specifically because the topic or the group of people that frequently comes up when we discuss shutdown are your military personnel. That's typically the front of the line and the negotiation or the bargaining chip used to say, don't let the military shut down because it creates security risks.
Right.
I'm I'm not going to pretend like you know what every single organization is doing, but if you have any info about if you know what tier they fall in, feel free to share that. And also, if there's anyone watching, feel free to comment about what your individual experience is. But yeah, if you have any knowledge about that, Scott, by all means.
Now that I don't, again, like you said, I don't know every detail of everything. I would suspect that DOD, especially boots on the ground people, would be in that essential. Nothing's changing for them. Again, that may be different than what I understand it, but I would assume that's it. But it could be something where they're in that middle tier where they're not getting paid, but they still have to keep showing up or keep working wherever they're working, and then it gets caught up once the government gets funded back again. But I don't see them considered as non-essential. Don't know it, but I wouldn't consider that to be a thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's unfathomable to me that I've never had to encounter a situation where I was required to come to work and I knew I wasn't going to get paid at least right away. I think the closest I ever got was in the 90s. We were getting paper checks, and the checks got delayed until like 4 p.m.
Yeah.
You had to wait, instead of them being there in the morning before your lunch break, you had to wait until like 5 o'clock until the truck got there.
It's funny because things like that feel. I mean, if something like that was on a private company, that'd be considered illegal. But since it's federal government, they have a different set of rules.
Oh, that's a whole nother show, Scott.
Oh, I know. Yeah, that's probably one I probably couldn't even show up on to talk about.
That's a private show for sure. So I've been reading about a lot of people asking about Social Security, and my understanding based on what I've read is that the distribution of payments will be uninterrupted.
Correct.
But there could be impacts to people who like customer service or service organizations or operations related to it.
Now you nailed it. Yeah, the payments themselves will be uninterrupted, but whether there will be personnel available for discussions, whenever you try to call someone, get someone on the other line to talk about if you've had an interruption in services, or if you've had a difference in your pay, or if you just the general types of things that everybody has with things like that come down. There might not be anybody on the other end of the line. There might not be anyone at the desk to talk to you until the government gets funded again. You've got it nailed down to the ground. It's
gotcha.
The money will still be coming in, the deposits will be coming in, but the people may not be there to help you if something goes south.
Yeah. Another topic that I saw was the timing of this is precarious, with coinciding with the furloughs, or I should say the can't pull the word right now. I'll just call it the furlough for student loan payments being lifted.
Where they're restarting the payments on student debt. Yeah, that's going to be interesting because that was supposed to start back up at 10/1. And with this, again, it's I don't know what's going to happen with that, because, again, we don't know what personnel is going to be available either to restart the payments of or receipt of those student debt payments.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much up in the air. You've got that one right too. It's going to be. I'm going to be curious to see what happens with that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of emotion around that. That's a pretty controversial topic also on both sides. I do not have student loans, but Tashina does, so it is something that we're watching closely, because it does impact our family. And I would never encourage anyone to not pay any debt that they have. And so I'm also not going to encourage anybody to root for a shutdown so that it will delay your student loan payments.
Right.
I don't think it's the right posture.
That's probably good. It's probably solid advice there. Yeah.
So something else I read, and I think this was I'm trying to remember. I think this was in a money.com article.
Okay.
It was talking about, here are some of the, most significant impacts that the shutdown will have.
Okay.
And one of the things they were talking about was the WIC program, so women and infant children.
Yeah.
And there's a staggering statistic that I read, and this is directly from USDA .gov. 42% of all children under the age of 1 are currently receiving some form of WIC benefits.
That's amazing. That's a
That's a
huge number.
staggering. I would have
Staggering
never
number.
guessed it was that many, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. That's a big number.
And that's scary to think that potentially children could have a disruption in their nutrition because of this shutdown.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that one is likely. I think there will be an interruption in WIC services if a shutdown does happen. I think that is one of the things that's directly affected.
Yeah, it's something that angers me. And again, I try not to be political, but I don't hide my emotion about this.
Right. It's hard to be unemotional about the health and welfare of literal infant children in America.
And all of us, right? All of the risks and all of the challenges that this poses. I'm starting to feel like Americans are pawns in a political chess game, right? And that whatever's being squabbled about, is it really more important than putting food in the mouths of indigent children?
Right.
That bothers me.
It's hard. It's one of the hard things to take is when you actually sit and assess what the fallout is of things like that. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from on that. And the thing is the individuals, the parties, whomever that are going to be found responsible for the lion's share of this shutdown, again, I think happening. The way to get around it is to remember next year's a major election year. Mm-hmm. Who are the people that caused this and react accordingly, so to speak, with a ballot.
Yeah, it's drawing similarities to me to the current UAW situation that we have. With the targeted strikes as 3 of the larger plants. The interesting development that came out of that was they don't have a deal in the books yet across the board, but because Ford has started to warm up negotiations and started to make some concessions, the UAW believes that their actions have shown enough good faith where they chose to expand their strikes on the Stellantis and on GM, but they decided not to strike any more of the Ford plants because they believe that Ford is showing them a sign of good faith. I'm drawing that parallel because I think that, and this is all political posturing because that's all these politicians, that's what they get paid to do. Right. But I think it's an important note that to look at who's doing what posturing and what their motivations might be. And to your point, how the way that we vote is going to be influenced by, what happened here, and that being a variable that we take into the voting booth. And,
right.
And I would guess that the majority of Americans follow party lines anyway, but sure. The elections are always decided by the people that are in the middle, right? So this is a milestone, to your point, when people are going into those booths to really that will inform them and that will stick in their minds as far as, what were the motivations of the individual people that are in charge of this decision, and is that going to impact whether people will continue to vote them in or vote them out?
Yeah. It's this is a very unusual one. I don't know if we talked about this during the telecast here or if we talked about it before, but this is an unusual shutdown in that it's coming at 10/1. Usually these shutdowns happen after an initial CR has been passed And shutdowns usually happen December, January, or something like that, whenever they have the initial CR passed. And then whenever that time runs out on that CR, they have to either pass a second CR or pass a spending bill. And then usually is when the shutdown happens. This one's happening right at 10-1, right at the beginning. And that's relatively unusual for federal government. So that's going to be another little wrinkle in this disruption that, I don't really know what the total effect is going to be with that, because we're trying to close the books. We're trying to start a new fiscal year. It's a very difficult time for us to be shutting down as the federal government on looking from the inside. Because there's just a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of late nights that we're working right now. Actually, I got off work late tonight, be working late the rest of the week and probably into the weekend. But that's the way it goes with fiscal year end. So
Gotcha.
getting back to your point, though, is that this is going to be one that has even more disruption than most shutdowns have, because of the fact that it's coming so soon in the fiscal year.
Gotcha. Well, I really want to thank you for coming on and taking the time to kind of break that down and explain that, because, there's a lot of prognostication and misinformation out there. And, I wanted to bring my viewers someone that's literally on the inside looking at this as it's happening, so that we can get a clear picture of what it is. So thank you so much for the time, Scott.
Anytime. I appreciate you having me on, Ben. I appreciate it. And we're fingers crossed that won't happen. I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be a long one, but hopefully it's not too much fallout as a result of it.
Yeah. Well, we'll continue to follow it very closely. And if work gets any lighter for you, I might have you come back on in a couple of weeks if this is still
sounds
going.
Good. It might be real light. We don't know. It might be real light there in a couple of weeks. I don't know.
I'm gonna get a text from you at like 10 in the morning. Hey man, what's going on?
Hey,
Want to do a show?
I'm just whistling through an empty hall here. I don't know what's going on in this place.
Thanks so much, Scott.
I'm
Appreciate it.
My key card even worked to let me get in. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know. That might be shut down too.
I don't know. Good time.
Thanks so much, Scott. Appreciate it.
Much. Appreciate you. Thanks.
All right.